In this training session, we're going to be talking about pre-qualifying your listing appointment. Now, I want you to pre-qualify every single listing appointment you set before you go on the appointment. This is going to be important for several reasons. One, it's going to make sure that the listing actually qualifies to be sold. For example, we want to know that the person owes less on the property than it's actually worth. We also want to test for compliance to make sure they actually pick up your phone call when you go to pre-qualify the appointment. And you're also going to be able to gauge their compliance level with you while you're pre-qualifying the appointment. And if there are any real sticky issues, you want to know about that as you're talking to them before you get on that appointment. We're also going to be going over motivation and a few other things that are important to know beforehand, so you're not just walking into an appointment blind, or worse yet, you get to the property and nobody answers the door. So of course, we're going to start out, and I always like to pre-qualify my appointment on a separate phone call from when I actually take the appointment. Because when you take the appointment and you wrap it up and you give them your next steps in that initial phone call, they're on the phone, they're talking to you. However, they may hang up and have not really been that into the appointment or something else, and they're just blowing you off and they're being kind and nice and just couldn't tell you they weren't interested. So when I call them back, usually I like to do this the day before the actual appointment. One, to remind them of the appointment, but also to continue to build rapport with them, and also to check for compliance to make sure they're actually picking up my phone call, which is a good indicator. If they don't pick up your phone call at all, there's a good chance they may not actually be at the property when you go on the appointment. So I'm checking for compliance and also for rapport, and to make sure that all of the concerns and issues that may arise, that I know about them beforehand. So of course, make sure you have their contact information filled out before you actually call to pre-qualify the appointment. So fill in that box at the top here. Then of course, you're just going to get into their motivation real quick, and we're going to go through this as a conversation. So hey, Mr. Seller, real quick, what were you hoping to accomplish when selling this property? And then they'll generally give you some kind of reason. Now, if they give you a reason that isn't really very detailed, if they just say, I don't know, we're thinking about X, Y, or Z or something, make sure you ask any follow-up questions that you need to, and also be very careful. Don't feed them answers. I have agents all the time who say, so let me ask you, why were you selling your property? Were you hoping to downsize? Were you hoping to upsize? And they start feeding answers to the seller, and there's a chance that the seller may just agree with you and not actually tell you anything. So be careful not to feed them the answer. So you're going to want to ask them, hey, Mr. Seller, so why are you moving? Oh, okay, you're moving to Florida. Okay, well, what's taking you there? It's very important not to just know where they're moving. And usually I like to ask that question in the form of, so are you staying local or leaving the area? Oh, that's interesting. So what's taking you there? And then hopefully you get them talking. You don't really want them answering yes or no questions. You want as much information as you can. And then, of course, these other questions are important, but not as important as the motivation itself. That's the main thing you need to know. It's just, why are they moving and where are they looking to go to? So, of course, yes, ask them if they're working with a buyer's agent. You'll be able to know how detailed you need to get in these answers, and you can tell by the tone in their voice. You can tell if you need to speed up your questions or slow down to match their pace. So, and then of course, how soon do they need to be there? One question I actually do like to hit in that first motivation section is, I'll ask them, so on a scale of 1 to 10, Mr. Seller, what would you say your level of motivation is? 1 being low, you don't want to move at all, and 10, you need to be moving next week. And then let them pick a number, and then ask them why they chose that number. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but just make sure you get that there. And that's going to kind of tell you what you're working with. Okay, and then the next section is the house. Tell me a little about your house, square footage, bedrooms, baths, how long have you owned it, any updates. So this section here, I like them to start telling me a little bit about the house. And the condition of the home is what I'm really trying to figure out there just so I can get an idea in my mind as I'm doing the market analysis. I want to kind of have an understanding, is this home in really good condition? Has it been lived in a really long time and not updated in 30 years? Because that's going to help you determine your market analysis or figure out, is this home really going to be a home that you can actually sell? Not only that, as you can see there, I also have them rate their home on a scale of 1 to 10. And then I ask them what would make it a 10. That's important because you want to kind of knock them off the idea that their home is this gem. Out of all the other similar homes in the area, theirs is special and unique and worth the very top amount of what the market will bear. Because if they're telling you, if they're rating their home as a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, that tells you, but they also hear themselves saying that, so it gets them off of expecting the absolute top dollar for that property unless it's in top dollar condition. And then also, when you ask them what would make it a 10, they're going to tell you some of the things that are maybe wrong with it or some things that may affect the value as you're doing your market analysis before you meet them. And then finally, financials. This is probably the most important thing that I want to find out in this pre-qualification phone call. I want to know, one, how much do they think the house is worth, so I kind of know what their expectations are before I get there. And also I want to know, how much do they owe on the property? That is key. I won't even go on a listing appointment unless I know how much they owe. And that way, when I'm doing a market analysis on the property and I see it's probably going to sell for $300,000, for example, and I know that they owe $310 or they owe $300 or even $290, I know they're going to be really tight in their payoff or might not even be able to sell it at all, or maybe that even becomes a short sale conversation that you have with them. And that isn't a conversation that I generally like to have during the listing appointment itself. If I can see that they may owe as much as the property's worth, and then you throw the transactional fees on top of that, and they may have to come to the table with a little bit of money, I will actually call them back after I do this pre-qualification phone call. I'll call them back and discuss that particular thing and let them know what it's probably going to sell for, and that we're probably going to break even or be a little bit upside down. And is a short sale maybe an option they would consider? Because if the answer is no to that, there's no purpose in going and spending 2 hours on a listing appointment with somebody where you can tell right up front that that house isn't going to qualify to sell, or they're not going to want to do a short sale option. So I hope that makes sense. And then that's also where it comes in. How much do you think the home is worth? I want to know what their attitude towards their property value is in relation to when I do the market analysis. And if they think their home is worth $750,000 and it really is only going to probably sell for $650,000, I want to know that before I go on that appointment. And in fact, if it's close, if it's within $30,000 or so, I'll still go on the appointment and not bring that up beforehand. But if they're way off from what it'll actually sell for what they're expecting, I'll also make a separate phone call before that appointment and discuss that issue and see how reasonable they are to actually listing this property at a price that'll cause it to sell. I want to save the time of going on that appointment if it's dead on arrival, just based on the numbers alone. I hope that makes sense. This is all about saving yourself some time so that you're not going on dead appointments that have no chance of becoming listings, because that time is better spent prospecting for actual sellers who can sell their property. A lot of agents have a very hard time with that because they think that they have something because they have an appointment, when in reality it's dead the whole time. So just because you now have knowledge that it's dead doesn't affect the fact that it was dead all along. And a lot of agents don't have enough business that they hold on to these thinking that they actually have something. And in the end, we want to focus on transactions that are actually going to put money in your pocket, that'll actually close, where you can actually help the seller accomplish their goals. And then finally, the tracking and conversion. I'm not too worried about that stuff. And if it's an expired listing, I will ask if they're interviewing other agents. And that's the last question there. That's important because if they are, I either want to go first or I want to go last. I always prefer going first because I know my skills and closing ratio is high enough that if I go first, there is a very good chance I'm actually going to be able to close them on the spot where they don't have to interview other agents. And I'll even say that during the listing appointment. I'll say, do you believe that we will be able to do a good job of getting your property sold? And once I close them on us, I let them know, hey, don't worry. You don't want to sit for 2 hours interviewing other agents now that you've already heard what you need to know to get your property sold. And if you've set those appointments and you feel bad about it, I'll be more than happy to call those other agents for you and cancel that appointment, because a lot of times they just feel bad about it. So it's always best to go first. And then I also tell them, if I can't go first, I'll go last. The problem with that is if another agent is strong enough at closing on their appointment and closing during that listing appointment, there's a good chance they will sign before you actually get there. So first is always better. And if you can't go first, go last. Because if you go in the middle, they're going to be kind of confused and have all this information. So people remember the first thing and the last thing generally when presented with information. So this is the pre-qualification of the listing appointment.